It was supposed to be a quiet evening. Just groceries, nothing dramatic. I'd pulled into the local store's parking lot, exhausted from the day, still wearing my police commander badge under my jacket. Not that anyone would have noticed. But the moment I stepped out of my car, I felt the tension. A woman was standing nearby, arms crossed, watching me too closely. And beside her, her teenage son was visibly agitated, eyes narrowed, body tense. I didn't engage. I just walked toward the store, hoping to grab my food and leave. But fate had other plans. He intercepted me halfway, demanding my groceries before I'd even bought them. "You people always take everything," he muttered, voice low but sharp. I froze, and in that moment I knew this wasn't just about groceries. This was something deeper, something ugly. I brushed past the boy, choosing silence over escalation. Inside the store, I tried to shake off the tension, scanning the shelves for what I needed. But when I turned into the first aisle, there he was again, standing in the middle, blocking my path. His mother followed behind, arms still folded, like she was guarding a kingdom. "He doesn't mean anything by it," she said dismissively, barely looking at me. "He's just passionate about community fairness." I raised an eyebrow. Community fairness? I kept my voice steady. "I'm just here to buy dinner." But the boy stepped closer. "Why do you people always think you can just walk in and take what's yours?" This wasn't ignorance. It was taught, embedded. Still, I reached for my badge not to flash authority, but to remind myself who I was. Calm, in control, a commander. And I knew now, this wouldn't be just another trip to the store. I tried to keep my distance, grabbing a few items and heading toward the checkout. But the boy wasn't done. He followed me, muttering under his breath, loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. "You think you're better than us?" he said, voice rising. I turned slowly. "I don't think anything. I just want to leave." His mother stepped in again, this time with a smirk. "You should be grateful we're not calling the HOA. You don't belong here." That word, belong, hit harder than I expected. I looked around. People were watching now. Some curious, some uncomfortable. No one intervened. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice low. "You might want to rethink your approach. I'm not just a shopper." But they didn't care. They were too deep in their own narrative, one where I was the villain. And I knew then this wasn't going to end quietly. I'd nearly made it to the exit when the boy lunged forward and knocked the grocery bag from my hand. Tomatoes rolled across the floor. A hush fell over the store. I bent down slowly, picking up the scattered items. No one helped, not even the cashier. Then I heard it, the mother dialing her phone, loudly, deliberately. "Yes, I'd like to report a disturbance," she said. "There's a man here causing trouble. He's aggressive, possibly dangerous." I stood up, calm but firm. "You're calling the police?" She smirked. "Yes. Let's see how you like being treated like a criminal." I reached into my jacket and pulled out my badge. "I am the police." Her face drained of color. The boy froze. But the call had already gone through, and now the real storm was coming. Minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. Shoppers peeked through the windows, whispering. The mother stood tall, arms crossed like she'd summoned justice itself. The officer stepped inside, scanning the scene. She rushed to them. "There he is," she pointed. "He threatened my son. He's unstable." I didn't move. I let her speak. One officer approached me cautiously. "Sir, we received a call about a disturbance." I handed him my badge. His eyes widened. "Commander?" The shift was immediate. Respect, confusion, a glance toward the woman, now visibly rattled. "I was buying groceries," I said calmly. "They followed me, harassed me, then called you." The second officer turned to the boy. "Is that true?" He hesitated, then looked down. The mother's face twisted. This is ridiculous. He's lying. But the truth was already unraveling. The officers stepped aside to confer, their expressions unreadable. The mother paced, clearly agitated. Her son stood frozen, eyes darting between me and the patrol cars. One officer returned. "We've reviewed the store's security footage." I nodded, and he glanced at the mother. "It shows you approaching him multiple times. No signs of aggression from the commander." Her voice cracked. "That's not possible." He threatened us. The second officer spoke up. "Ma'am, we also spoke to witnesses. No one saw him act aggressively, but several heard your son make racially charged remarks." The boy's face turned pale. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet, precise. The officer turned to me. "Would you like to press charges?" I looked at the boy, scared, confused, unraveling. "No," I said. "Let's just make sure this doesn't happen again." But I knew this moment would echo far beyond the store. The officers escorted the mother and her son outside, not in cuffs, but in silence. The crowd inside slowly dispersed, murmuring about what they'd witnessed. Some nodded at me, others avoided eye contact. I stepped out into the parking lot, the evening air thick with tension. The patrol cars remained, lights off now, but still present, a symbol of what had just unfolded. The mother was arguing with one of the officers. "He humiliated us. This isn't over." But her voice lacked conviction. The power she thought she had gone. I walked past them, groceries in hand, head held high. The officer who'd first approached me gave a subtle nod. "Sorry you had to deal with that, sir." I nodded back. "It's not the first time, but maybe it'll be the last for them." And with that, I drove off, not just with groceries, but with a story that would echo far beyond the HOA gates. By the next morning, word had spread. The HOA group chat was buzzing. Screenshots, speculation. Some defended the mother, claiming she was misunderstood. Others were silent, too silent. I didn't respond. I let the facts speak. But then came the twist. A neighbor posted the store's security footage. Clear, unedited. The boy's aggression, the mother's smirk, my calm response, my badge. The comments shifted. "Didn't know he was a commander. She really messed up. This is embarrassing for the HOA." The mother tried damage control, posting a long message about miscommunication and emotional stress. But it was too late. The truth had already taken root, and I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about a community, forced to confront its own reflection. Later that week, the HOA held a private meeting. No agenda, no transparency, but whispers leaked out. Some board members were furious, not at the mother's behavior, but at the fact she'd been exposed. "She embarrassed the community," one said. "She made us look bad," another muttered. Not a word about the racism, not a word about the harassment. I watched from the sidelines, knowing their priorities were clear, image over integrity. But then, a surprise, one board member resigned, publicly, citing moral conflict and failure to uphold community values. That post went viral, and suddenly, the HOA wasn't just dealing with a scandal, they were facing a reckoning. In the days that followed, neighbors who'd never spoken to me before started nodding in passing. A few even stopped to chat. Cautiously, awkwardly, "I saw the footage," one said. "Didn't know you were a commander." Another added, "I'm sorry. We should have said something." It wasn't guilt. It was realization. That silence had a cost. Meanwhile, the mother and her son kept a low profile. No more confrontations. No more smug glances. Just quiet avoidance. But the HOA board remained split, some pushing for reform, others clinging to control. And beneath it all, a question lingered in the air. What kind of community do we want to be? A week later, I sat down and wrote a letter, not out of anger, but out of necessity. It was addressed to the HOA board, and it wasn't just about the incident. It was about the culture. I described what happened, the harassment, the false accusations, the silence from the community. And I asked one simple question: what are you doing to ensure this never happens again? I didn't expect a response, but I posted it publicly on the community forum, where everyone could see. The reactions were swift. Some applauded the honesty, others deflected. A few tried to downplay it, but the message was clear. The days of quiet complicity were over, and for the first time, the board couldn't hide behind closed doors. After the letter, something shifted. A younger couple posted a message in support, not just of me, but of accountability. "We moved here for safety and fairness," they wrote. "Let's make sure we live up to that." Others followed. Quiet voices, now louder. Stories of subtle discrimination. HOA decisions that favored a few. Patterns that had gone unnoticed or ignored. The board was cornered. They issued a statement, vague, diplomatic, full of "we're listening and we value all residents." But it wasn't enough. A petition began circulating, calling for new leadership, transparency, and mandatory bias training. And for the first time, the HOA wasn't just reacting. It was being challenged. The HOA board tried to hold firm, issuing statements, scheduling closed-door meetings, insisting everything was under review. But the community wasn't buying it. A local journalist picked up the story, not just the confrontation, but the deeper issues: racial bias, HOA overreach, and the silence that followed. The article went viral. Suddenly, the board wasn't just facing residents, they were facing public scrutiny. The mother and her son were mentioned, though not named. Their behavior dissected, their silence deafening. And through it all, I remained quiet, not out of fear, but because the truth was speaking louder than I ever could. The foundation of the HOA's authority was cracking, and change was no longer a request. It was a demand. The HOA board finally relented. A public town hall was scheduled, open to all residents. No filters, no scripts. Chairs filled quickly. The air was thick with anticipation. I sat near the back, watching as neighbors took the mic. One after another, they spoke, not just about the incident, but about years of quiet bias, overlooked complaints, and decisions made in shadows. Then the board president stood up. "We failed," he said. "Not just in this moment, but in the culture we allowed to grow. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start." New policies were proposed, transparency measures, diversity, training, a community oversight committee. And for the first time, the HOA wasn't just reacting, it was rebuilding. Weeks passed. The community was quieter now, not in silence, but in thought. The HOA had begun implementing reforms. New board members were elected. Bias training sessions were scheduled. Transparency became more than a buzzword. The mother and her son eventually moved away. No announcement, no farewell, just absence. And yet, their departure wasn't the end of the story. Neighbors continued to talk, not about the scandal, but about change, about accountability, about the kind of place they wanted to build. One evening, a young boy from the neighborhood approached me outside my home. "Are you really a commander?" he asked. I smiled. "Yes." He nodded. "Cool, I want to be like you." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about groceries, or HOA, politics, or one confrontation. It was about legacy, and how one moment can reshape an entire community.